So this is the lesson for 9-2 for algebra. What we're talking about today is determining R value, which is the correlation coefficient of a scatter plot, and determining whether if it is linear or nonlinear. So you have to know the difference between a positive correlation, a negative correlation, and no correlation. In positive correlation, the dots go up. When you take a look at a scatter plot has dots all over the place. When you take a look at positive correlation, you always go, first of all, when you look at a scatter plot, you always go from left to right, just like you read a sentence. So we're starting down here and we are going up, going from left to right. So positive correlation, the dots go up. In this middle one, going from left to right, just like we read a sentence, the dots are going down. When the dots go down from left to right, that is a negative correlation. And then when the dots are all over the place, that is no correlation. When the dots are randomly scattered all over the place, that means there is no relationship with the data. So positive goes up, negative goes down, no is all over the place. So there's different kinds of correlation coefficient or R value. And this is what it looks like graphically. All right. We learned about this before. Remember that you always have to turn on your stat diagnostics when we're talking about this. All right. The way that you turn on your stat diagnostics is through the mode button. All right. Remember mode, and then you have to go all the way down to here for it to turn on your stat diagnostics. So I'm going to do that right now. The automatic setting when you first turn on your calculator or you clear the memory is that stat diagnostics are off. Remember that you have to turn them on in order to get the R value. All right, so make sure that you turn on your stat diagnostics. So when we're taking a look at these scatter plots, again, an R value that is positive, like 0.3, 0.8, or 1, those dots go up. An R value that's negative, like negative 0.3, negative 0.8, and negative 1, those dots go down from left to right. The stronger relationship is when it's closer to negative 1 or positive 1. Notice how tightly these dots are forming a line. And then as we gradually get closer to 0 or gradually get closer to 0, those dots get farther and farther spread apart. So when we have 0, when we have an R value of 0, this is no correlation with an R value of 0 because the dots are just randomly all over the place. As we get more positive and more positive closer to 1, the dots get closer and closer and closer in a line. All right. These dots are going up. These dots are going up. You can tell it even better. And then these dots almost form a straight line at 1. These dots are going down. These dots are going down, but they're getting closer and closer together. And then we get to an R value of negative 1 where they form a straight line going down. So the stronger relationship is towards negative 1 and positive 1. The weaker relationships are when we get more towards 0. But you have to look at the majority of the dots and what direction they're going in. So when we take a look at a scatter plot, and you'll have questions just like this on your homework today, is the scatter plot positive, negative, or no? And then which R value do you think is correct? Now, obviously, positive, negative, and no are going to be easy to tell. These dots going from left to right, just like we read a sentence, they are going in that direction. So they are going up as we go from left to right. So that means this is a positive correlation. And then which R value is correct? Now, this is going to be multiple choice on your homework. The way that I would take a look at these questions is obviously if it's positive, the negative answers are wrong. So it has to be either this first one or this third one. Now, an R value of 0.7. 0.7 is close to 0.8. Take a look at what 0.8 looks like. The dots are closer together, where our other choice is 0.07. 0.07, think about that in terms of money. That's like 7 cents compared to 0.7, which is 70 cents. So if you think of that in the scale of $0 to $1, 7 cents is closer to here. It's closer to 0. So are these dots closer together, or are they sort of almost to 0 where it's no relationship? Well, they are closer together. So 0.7 would be your correct answer. In the next one, as we go from left to right, the dots are going down. So it has to be a negative correlation. Since it's negative, I could get rid of this choice and this choice because those are positive. And then remember, as it gets closer to -1, it forms more of a straight line. As it gets closer to 0, the dots are randomly all over the place. Well, you have like -0.9 and -0.09. -0.9 is really close to -1. So is it really close to forming a straight line? Yes, it is. Where -0.09 would be very close to 0, so the dots would be all over the place. So this one is -0.9. In this third one, the dots, this one's hard to tell, all right? It sort of looks at first when you look at it, it sort of looks like maybe the dots are going down, but then we have these 3 dots down here, which maybe it's going up. It's really all over the place. All right. This is an example of no correlation. You can't tell for sure if the dots are going up or if the dots are going down. You have no idea. Well, R value of 1 would be a straight line going up, and R value of 0.5 would still be pretty much a big grouping that's going up. But 0.01, that's really, really close to 0, which is no correlation. And that's what this one is. So some of your homework questions today will look like that. The next thing that you're going to have to do is determine the correlation coefficient. Remember, that is your R value for each set of data. Round to the nearest 10,000th. All right. Now, 10,000th is 4 decimal places. All right. 4 decimal places. So, what you're going to have, for example, as answers is you might have something like 0.8125. All right. That has 4 decimal places. That's rounded to the nearest 10,000. So again, you have to make sure your stat diagnostics are turned on, because otherwise you're going to go through this process and you're not going to get an R value showing up on the screen. It will just be blank. You'll see your A, you'll see your B, but you won't see your R value. So again, what you're going to do is type these numbers into stat and edit. Remember that all points are written X, comma, Y. So we want to go into stat and edit. I need to get rid of my questions that were here before from another day. So we have as X values -3, 1, and 3. So -3, 1, and 3. For my L2 value, I have -3, 2, and 4. So I typed in my R value, I typed in my X values into my L1. I typed in my Y values into my L2. Now I need to do stat calc and then number 4, which is linear regression. So stat calc, number 4 is linear regression. When you hit enter there, it's going to ask you, do you want the ones in L1 and L2? Yes, we do. That's the one that we typed it in at. And we get this printout. All right. Now we want to round to the nearest 10,000. Be very careful. We don't want the R squared value. We want the R value, which is the bottom one. So we have 0.9986 when we round to the nearest 10,000th. Let's try another one. So let's try that one below it. So let's clear out what we have here. So for this one, we have X values of 0, 5, and 3. So 0, 5, and 3. And then for my L2 values, I have 100, 82, and 75. So again, I want to go to stat calc number 4, which is linear regression, and then go down to calculate. and it's going to give us our R value, which is this bottom one. Notice that this time it is negative 0.775. And then this one, because it has an 8 after the 3, we would round it up to be negative 0.7754. Now, when you're looking at R values, this one would be positive because our R value is positive. This one would be negative because our R value is negative, all right? This one, the graph of this one, the dots would be going up. The graph of this one, because our R value is negative, the graph of those dots would be going down. This would be very, very close to +1. So these dots would almost form a straight line. This one would form a straight line going down, but the dots would be a little bit more spread apart. Now let's take a look at the next one. All right, let's take a look at the next one. Keenan, your question, how do you get the R value? Stat, calc, and then number 4. Stat, calc, number 4. You have to make sure that your stat diagnostics are turned on. If you don't turn on your stat diagnostics in the mode button, it won't show up. So taking a look at this question, you'll have questions like this on your homework as well. Now, be very, very careful, all right? Remember, whenever you're typing data into your L1 and L2, if you have years, years always start with 0. You're not going to type in 1971 through 1978. That's not what you're going to type in. Years always start with 0. So this is going to be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. All right, be very, very careful with that. So we want to find the R value. We need to say if it's linear or nonlinear. And if it's linear, write the linear regression equation. Now, for the linear regression equation, remember that is in y equals mx plus b form. On your calculator, instead of m, it's going to have an a. All right. So we want to go to our stat and edit. We want to clear out. All right. We want to clear out that previous question. So I'm going to type in my years in my L1. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And then in my L2, I want to type in, oh, these look like percents of obese children. So I'm typing in my percents of my obese children here into my L2. Again, one of the biggest mistakes that people make is typing the data in wrong. So always just double check your data. All right, always double check your data just to make sure that you typed it in correctly. So now we want to find the R value. Again, the way that we find the R value, stat, calc, number 4 for linear regression. Hit enter. We want L1 and L2, so we're going to go down to calculate. And the calculator does its magic. We want the R value down here at the bottom. Let's just round this one to the nearest hundredth. So if we round this one to the nearest hundredth, we would have 0.92. Is the data going to be linear or nonlinear? This is going to be linear. Those dots are really close together. They would be forming a straight line and they would be going up. If the data is linear, write the linear regression equation. So we have to look at our A value and our B value. Notice that on the calculator, it says y equals ax plus b. So let's round these to the nearest hundredth again. So we would have the equation y equals 2.005 would really round to the nearest hundredth to be 2.01. Don't forget your x. And then your plus or minus is your b. This would round to be 6.32. Since it's positive 6.32, it would be plus 6.32. Let's take a look at the next one. And this is the last one. So this time we have hours. Now, you're going to use these exact numbers for the hours. The only reason that we use 0 through 7 here is because we were talking about years. Any other thing besides years, you're going to use the exact numbers. Years are the only time where you want to start with 0 and count by ones, all right? So we're going to use these actual numbers in our data for our L1 and our L2. So when we take a look at our L1 and our L2, we're actually going to type in 0, 6. A lot of times people ask me every year, do I have to type in the 0 if there's a 0 there? Yes, you do, because it's a data point. All right, that 0 is very, very important. You do have to type in the 0. So that's my data for my L1. In L2, amount of antibiotic in the body. So we're going to type in these numbers. I have no idea what that means, but we don't really care. So again, always make sure that you're typing in your data accurately. The biggest mistake that people make on these questions is typing in the wrong number, because if you even have one little decimal place off, it will throw off everything, including your R value. So there's my data. I'm just going to double check my data really quick. Yep, that looks good to me. So we're going to go to Stat, Calc, go down to number 4, which is linear regression, go down to Calculate, and I'm going to see my R value there. Now, this time my R value is negative. One of the other biggest mistakes, I'm just going to round to the nearest hundredth again. One of the other biggest mistakes that people make, and I don't know why this happens, is they forget to write down the negative sign when there's a negative sign there for our R value. I don't know why people do that, but they do it all the time on the quiz and the test for this chapter. Is the data linear or nonlinear? These are very close to -1. -1 is linear, so these would be linear. If the data is linear, write the linear regression equation. So y equals, our A value is -1.07 if we were going to round to the nearest hundredth. And our B value is 42.26. So plus 42.26. And that's what you have to do today.